Spider, spider, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? This week on the Comic Book Report, Spider-Man, Kraven's Last Hunt. Stick around and check it out. Greetings, webheads. My name is Dominic, and you're watching the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. Today, we're taking a look at Kraven's Last Hunt. This is a classic Spider-Man story that I don't hear as many people talk about these days, so I can't wait to dive in. But before we do, here are some quick facts about today's collection. Spider-Man, Kraven's Last Hunt was written by J.M. DeMatteis and illustrated by Mike Zeck. The issues in this collection were first published by Marvel Comics in 1987, and this standard-size trade paperback collection includes Web of Spider-Man issues 31 and 32, Amazing Spider-Man issues 293 and 294, and Spectacular Spider-Man 131 and 132. And this volume comes in at 168 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through today's collection and commenting on plot points. You've been warned. Alrighty, and here is your first look at Spider-Man, Kraven's Last Hunt. Admittedly, I have a little bit of an older copy. I know there's been subsequent collections in both hardcover and other trade paperbacks, but I'm not sure if any are still in print right now. At any rate, you can still find used copies as well as on digital. But I just wanted to make sure you could get a good look at mine as we review it today. You'll get an idea of what to expect. Man, I just love that picture of Kraven on the back. He just looks totally insane. It just sets me up to really enjoy this collection. Okay, let's dive into the book itself. So this is a standard size trade paperback. The finish of the paper is kind of interesting. I think it's closer to matte rather than gloss, but it might be a very, very low level gloss. I have a similar kind of finish with my standard size Frank Miller Daredevil collections as well. It's an interesting page format, but they're sturdy pages and it's great for this read. The art comes through on these collections really nice, and I have no real complaints about the paper stock. Something else I want to note as well, you do get the reproductions of the covers of each of these issues at the front of each issue. I love seeing that. It's pretty common with Marvel and DC trades, but I still love seeing it. Gives you a good idea of what it would have been like if you had these individual issues. I know some of you probably did. Again, just always great to see. As far as what to expect from Kraven's Last Hunt, this is a 6-issue series spread across all 3 ongoing Spider-Man books at the time, I believe, but it's from the same creators across every issue, so it really reads like one continuous story. Frankly, I wouldn't have known it was from Web of Spider-Man, and Amazing Spider-Man, and Spectacular Spider-Man, unless I'd seen the titles on those covers. As far as the story itself, it picks up when Peter Parker is in a particularly dark phase of his life. He's in the black and white cloth Spider-Man costume, so this is after he no longer has the symbiote, but before Venom shows up and starts terrorizing everyone and he gets rid of the suit. So he's in that sharp black and white outfit, and as he's dealing with some personal hardships, in comes Kraven, who has gone a bit mad and is trying to once and for all prove himself as the superior hunter and being. To that end, he has this plan to basically kill off or remove Spider-Man, take his place, and generally triumph over enemies of Spider-Man that even he could not defeat. This plan also heavily involves the villainous Vermin, who at the time is going through the sewers of New York to come up and abduct and kill women on the streets. Overall, it's really just a dark storyline, particularly for a Spider-Man book. I mean, even the title, Kraven's Last Hunt, kind of evokes this sense of finality. And looking at the cover of this collection and the cover of some of these issues, it's pretty evident that Spider-Man is actually buried alive at one point. Or at least he's in the grave. This book has some pretty dark themes, and overall is just a wild ride. The art inside the collection by Zeck is definitely of the time in the late 80s, and it is just gorgeous. I love the way that he depicts New York, both through the city, in the housing, in the sewers. It just feels so living and breathing, almost as if New York is its own character in this. There is such rich detail, and I just feel completely absorbed when I read this book, just staring at all of these images. I also really enjoy the character models, and particularly how Zeck depicts faces. There's so many intense grimaces of anguish or surprise or hurt or malice. As a reader, I really just feel like his characters jump right off the page. Something else I really like in this collection as well is the phase in which Kraven is impersonating Spider-Man. There is actually a moment where this Kraven Spider-Man comes across Mary Jane Watson. In this scene, Mary Jane is visibly shaken, realizing that this is in fact not Peter Parker. While I think that this scene was really effective, I also think it's pretty cool, particularly when I think that, in a different collection, a couple issues later, we have Mary Jane stumbling across Venom when he first appears, and he's also in a black and white Spider-Man-like outfit. I just think it's wild how many imposter Spider-Mans this poor woman has come across. It's also worth noting the brutality that both Peter Parker exhibits as Spider-Man, but especially the brutality that Kraven does when he's impersonating Spider-Man. This is a fairly violent book that could be triggering to some people, particularly as this collection reaches its climax and we have Kraven succumb to his own declining mental health. And I know that Kraven has been back in subsequent years and subsequent collections in one form or another, but I think in my mind, this will always be the swan song for this character. And to see a definitive chapter end for one of Spider-Man's classic cast of villains, well, frankly, it's just really something to read. For those who have maybe not read Kraven's Last Hunt, I just have to say that this brooding, atmospheric story is kind of haunting in its way. I find myself recalling images, dialogue, and generally moments from this story, even minutes, months, years after reading. I think it's easy for a classic story like Kraven's Last Hunt to stick around for a while. And with this collection finished, I think it's time I go ahead and give Spider-Man Kraven's Last Hunt its grade. For this gripping psychological thriller that I personally believe is one of the darkest chapters within the Spider-Man mythos, the Comic Book Report has to give Spider-Man Kraven's Last Hunt a B+. This is a high recommend for me, for any comic book fan, but in particular for Spider-Man fans everywhere. While there might be some distressing moments within this collection that could be a little bit of a trigger for some, I feel pretty confident in considering this a classic work for Spider-Man. The way that Zeck instills such believability into not only the character models and artwork, but also the city itself, coupled with some really strong writing that really makes me think about the nature of these characters. And frankly, what happens when they reach their breaking points. To me, there is no better Kraven story. And frankly, there are a few other Spider-Man stories that make me sincerely care about and or sympathize with the villain as much as this story does. In this way, Kraven's Last Hunt is without rival, at least in my eyes. And that's going to do it today for the Comic Book Report. Let me know what you thought below in the comments, and until next time, have a good one.